I'm Shayla Johnston. I'm here to try to give grandparents some insight on problems that we've seen, solutions that can be proposed, some of which were just introduced by the wonderfully wise woman who spoke for me. You'll have to pardon me. I'm a third-generation attorney. Evan Brewer was my cousin. I did everything in my power to try to save his life legally, and it was thwarted at every turn. So whatever you've gone through out there, you're not crazy. It is set up for us to fail. It is set up to have children who are marketable to be placed into foster care. Children who are severely abused, don't have as high of a market value in the adoption market, and they are generally ignored by DCF. I don't say this off the cuff. My cousin Evan's dad, Carlo, and I have spent the last 6 months surveying everybody who would talk to us. So we've talked to foster parents, long-term foster parents, not brand new ones who've been in the system for 20 years, good foster parents. We've talked to judges, current ones, off the record, retired ones, not off the record, but please asking me not to use their names. Of course, talked to parents and grandparents, other parents, kids, what they want, including these elusive runaway foster care kids who are not so elusive, they just are not going to put up with going back in the system. We've identified a generalization of 3 different problems within the system. It's not just a DCF problem. It is a problem with judges, it is a problem with law enforcement, and generally it's a problem with too many chefs in the kitchen. There is nobody to hold accountable with a finger and say, you are the one who caused this child's death. I know who ultimately caused Evan Brewer's death, but holding a judge accountable is going to be quite a fight that we are in for, by the way. So I'm here to tell you not just about my background, because I have fought the fight, and I continue to fight it for other grandparents. Now, as a reluctant attorney, because it was Evan's grandparents who brought me into this, and Kathy and Carl are not here, my aunt and uncle, the Brewers. But on behalf of them, let me tell you that they are the ones who got me to come back into the legal field. I had fought a custody battle for 5 years. I am a sole legal custodian to an 11-year-old boy. And I have had to seek asylum in Colorado to protect his interests because of the backlash against me exposing what's been going on. But we're here, and no one's arrested me yet. So I'm here to tell you that Carl and Kathy are the ones who got me away from my nice cushy desk job at Vornado Air. I don't know if you've ever heard of them in Andover, as a fan company. I was a global litigation, I was in compliance. I did whether packaging met European standards, very easy stuff, no dying children. And then my Aunt Kathy called me and told me in the fall of 2016 that my cousin Evan was in a dire situation. That Evan's mother seemed to be addicted to drugs, and they were being seen showing up to various family members' houses begging for food, etc. And then eventually that she had come back into contact and let a man named Stephen Bodine live in the home with them. So I said, okay, well, it's family, and I know what a mess it is up there. So I went back in, and it was awful. So until Evan's death, you just could not get judges to believe that they needed to do anything to protect a child from abuse. So there were at least 3, if not 4 judges who I told personally and on the record, you have to do this because this child is in imminent danger, and they refused. With the last one being the chief judge of Sedgwick County, James Fleetwood, who left a voicemail for me 3 days before Evan died, saying that I was not allowed to seek emergency orders on his behalf. So keep fighting, and I'm going to tell you how. But know that it is grandparents who sucked me back into this. So I'm here reluctantly, but if we're going to do this, we're going to do this right. So cheers to Carl and Kathy, who kept it quiet, but then they got us every resource we could. I'm here to tell you, we had all the support in the world, and like I said in the beginning, if we couldn't save a child's life, no child is safe, none. So here's what I've learned. On my Facebook page, my new law firm, it's called Excellence Legal. Please go through that. Don't bother my poor father, Kelly Johnston. He's also an attorney. He's trying to retire. He works for Johnston Law Offices, where I worked for 15 years with him and my grandfather. He's getting on my phone calls that he doesn't know what to do. He just wants to go out and go fishing and hunting, and it just makes him cry. So please don't call Johnston Law Offices. My law firm is called Excellence Legal, and it's on Facebook right now. There's a link on there in the notes section about grandparents' rights. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. There's more legal stuff in there, but I'm going to give you some tips that grandparents can take away right now. And I call this affectionately our Project Grandpa John, named after John Brown. If you've ever been inside the Topeka Capitol, you know the mural. So whenever I think about all this mess that we're going through, I think of John Brown must be rolling in his grave. Like all that work he did to make sure that children were not enslaved in Kansas, and now look where we are. So Project Grandpa John is our efforts to try to make these legal protections available to all grandparents. I can't represent everybody, and some of you, are perfectly capable. I wouldn't say some of you. I'd say the majority of you are perfectly capable of going into a courtroom with the forms that we're providing and arguing this with a judge, because they're not as smart as you might think they are. So you'll be armed with the actual statutes, and I tell you, you have nothing to lose. You can go through the different steps there. It tells you when to seek a protection from abuse order as a grandparent, rather than having to go to sink court. Protection from abuse orders, if you all have not been through that process, that is what could have saved the majority of these children, and they're free. There's no filing fee. They're just generally discouraged by the family law bar. And now my efforts to change that have started to work, at least in Sedgwick County. But I was up there last week, and it was the largest PFA docket they'd ever had. So it is working, and kudos to the judges who are coming in to handle the overflow, because they are doing a good job. Use that PFA. The PFA is free. It lasts for a year. It avoids sink court, which is a mess, and it avoids having you go into family law court, where there's basically a mandatory provision that you have to pay for the fees of the parent. PFA, you only have to pay maybe if you lose, maybe. So parents, to file a PFA, the child has had to have resided with you. And what resided means is open for interpretation. There's one case in our courts that says it could mean stay, like they stayed overnight, they stayed for a visit, they stopped by. I would suggest that as concerned grandparents, make this part of your family estate planning, that when you have a grandchild, you make sure that grandchild, you say, okay, come, let me take the kid while you go on vacation. Let me give you a break. Set up something hopefully regular. I know some of you live out of town. Make sure that you make the offer and let those grandkids stay with you, and stick by it. That will supply, in case you ever need it, the residing with provision, unless the legislature changes it, because the statute has been changed about 2 or 3 times in the last 10 years. That's your first line of defense. The other thing is, when those grandchildren stay with you, offer to take them to medical visits, take them to see the dentist, because then there's a medical record of saying, oh, Bobby was here with grandma. You're in the medical records. Ask if you can sign the parent will sign a HIPAA form, because the HIPAA form shows that at some point you had some type of legal authority over the child. Make sure that you, if the child is staying with you for any length of time, get a power of attorney. Some of them are free and online. I've developed some specifically for this purpose, and it shows that the parents gave you guardianship of the child for some period of time. These are all documents that you may never need, but if you do, just like your will or your life insurance policy, it's there. And these will show that the child resided with you and the parents had provided some guardianship to you at some point. You need to also prove a substantial relationship. So with any of these options that are available, the PFA, if you have to go through family law court, which means if the grandchild never resided with you, there are other extingent circumstances. If you have to go through there, you're going to have to prove a substantial relationship. That same term is needed in sink court if, God forbid, the child is taken out of custody. in an emergency situation. A substantial relationship, I would say, go to school events. School calendars are online. Look up your grandkids' school events and make sure you're there. Obviously, if you're on outs with the parents, that's not going to be good, but who's going to throw a grandparent out? You know, just don't stick around the parents. Go sit on the opposite side of the room. Make sure you're there. Don't make drama. Just make sure you're present, and your grandkids say hi, let them know you're there. Be present. That shows a substantial relationship, even if they're alienating you. They're not going to throw you out of the auditorium. Make the parent look really terrible. So stick to your guns, just be pleasant. Go to sports. Make sure that in some respect on birthdays or holidays, even if you're not allowed to see the child, that you are sending cards, that you are trying to interact. Make documentation of this type of thing. Make reasonable requests for visitation. This is very important. So if you have to go into family law court, if the child has never resided with you, or for some reason you're funneled in there, we haven't stopped all those efforts to funnel all cases through family law court yet. But if you're forced to go through there, then you need to show that you made a reasonable request for visitation that turned you down, and they turned you down. For example, if you said, I'd really like for the grandkid to spend 1 week every summer with me, and the parent says, no, but maybe a weekend once a month. So this issue has been up to the Supreme Court, and that is probably one exception that you guys should exploit for this provision that you have to pay the other side's fees, you have to pay the parent's fees. If you are making reasonable requests for visitation and you can show a substantial relationship, and you said, I asked for a week, they offered 1 weekend a month, I said, okay, that's good, we'll start with 1 weekend a month, and then they took those away, then you're being alienated, right? If they take those away, then it's going to be difficult for that parent to say, oh, grandma should pay for my fees, because it's that reasonable visitation that was rejected that really causes a turn. This hasn't been heavily litigated. This is me telling you my gut instinct. Judges aren't going to like that. If you've been a very conciliatory grandparent who's done all of these things, and then your visitation gets cut back, plus if you've shown that there's some type of allegation of abuse, that's going to help you out. You'd be able to avoid those attorney's fees, maybe. If you do see abuse, you have to report it. Just like the wool heaters told you, they knew what was going to happen once they made the report of abuse. My suggestion is this right now. DCF is, and I'll say this very loud and clear, DCF in performing child abuse investigations is non-functional. So don't rely on them to do child abuse investigations. They are non-functional. Make your reports of abuse to local law enforcement in Wichita. That's how we're going. We've had 2 arrests for child abuse in the last 2 weeks. So it's working down there. But if you do see abuse, put it in writing and send it to the secretary, Gina Meyerhummel. Her address is online, so you can Google it. Send it by certified mail. Say what your abuse allegations are, and then put in there that you request custody of the grandchild. And this is really important because, as Ms. Keach was describing, she doesn't understand why, and neither did I, why, if we have a grandparent preference statute in the state of Kansas, why did the wool heaters not get custody? You know, why is that being avoided? Why isn't it happening in 75% of the cases? So we've started to test it out. I will tell you that on my Facebook in the notes section, it gives you a printout of the ex parte, I know it's tiny, ex parte order of protective custody. This is what has to be signed in sync court. If the police come in and they take a child, a judge has to sign a 72 order ex parte emergency order. At the very bottom, this is the mandated form by Kansas Judicial Council. It has a check mark box. It says a grandparent has requested custody, and in evaluating what custody, visitation, and residency arrangements are in the best interest of the child, substantial consideration is given to, number 1, the wishes of the parents, child, and grandparent. Number 2, the extent that the grandparent has cared for the child, the intent and circumstances under which the child is placed, and 3, the physical and mental health of all involved individuals. The statute is printed in full, my notes. You'll see there's other factors like, was there domestic violence, and that's why the grandparent is having to be involved, but they didn't put this in their official form. But the fact of the matter is, I wonder whether some of you who've had your grandchildren taken away from you through the sync process, whether this box was ever checked. Because I know the ones that I've just seen, the box wasn't checked, and I'm in court going, where's the finding that the grandparent was less fit than DCF? Because I don't see it. And if you didn't mark that box, that means we're going to be in federal court. because you've got illegal custody of a child. That's what we're dealing with. You're not imagining things. It's there. For some reason, even when I read it out to the court, they say, do you really mean legal custody or do you mean residential? I'm like, I really do know what legal custody means, Judge. I promise I do know. I almost want to put a notice in these records, like, notice to the court, Shayla Johnston knows the difference between legal custody and residential custody, and so do all these other grandparents. So let's start actually reading what the forms say, and start following due process. Look at that. If you've had your grandchildren taken away in the SYNC process, you need to request the SYNC documents. And you can, even though they pretend like they can't give them out, they can. And there's an additional new form that we've developed to make them release that information. And you see whether that box was filled out. Because if it wasn't, then you can go back into SYNC court. Procedurally, there's a statute that allows you to go back in there and dispute a wrongful adoption. And that's the next step that you all need to consider. Because once termination occurs, once they've been adjudicated, then your appeal rights as grandparents diminish. They kind of, I haven't quite figured out how they just kind of go away. But in any case, the time to do it is at the beginning. You start by putting any abuse allegation directly to the secretary, and you say, I request custody of my grandchild, because that fulfills this requirement. We don't know if it's going to work or not, but all I'm telling you is just do it, because it's not going to hurt, and hopefully it will help. So those are my tips that are not necessarily online that I'm giving to you here today. The main thing is that if you can keep one of the child's parents in your good graces, if you can help them out, then you can have that parent, if times get rough, you can have that parent sign a power of attorney, and a very extensive one, like I mentioned. And then you don't have any of this, except you may need some legal guardianship papers if you want to put them on your insurance, etc. We won't get into that here, but a power of attorney that's very detailed. I think the one I have is like 6 or 7 pages long, and this essentially avoids all of this mess. You avoid attorney's fees, and you preserve your child's ability to go back in and perhaps be a productive parent just between you and I, or you and the child and the grandchild, without involving the state. So on my final note, you all need to keep doing what you're doing. You need to spread the good word, because we are at a precipice right now where we've got the attention of everybody. Changes are occurring rapidly. You heard the Wool Heaters talk about situation in Wichita. In Wichita, we were losing a child by bludgeoning death about every 26 days. We've now been more than a month, and that's something we have to celebrate in Wichita. And these are all, 6 months old to 5 years old, with the most recent one being found was Lucas Hernandez. And the year before that, we know we lost Evan, and that was right under their noses. So in Wichita, when I say DCF's worthless, we're not waiting on them, judges are like, yeah, we know. It is happening. So take advantage of that for your child. They will listen now. And if you have questions, I'm happy to answer, but I can't help everybody. Like I said, I've been in business now for about 6 months. I just hired an assistant, and so I know I'm overloaded. I have about 38 calls to return, and I'm getting there. But grandparents are the ones who are going to turn this around. So that's Project Grandpa John. We're going to make it as easy as we can for all of you, so you can give the forms out to everybody who might benefit from it. And then if those forms don't work, then maybe then you need an attorney, but you don't need an attorney to start this process. You just need to let them know that you're not going to do this anymore. Thank you so much.
Where's the paperwork at?
What's that?
What paperwork are you talking about?
On my Facebook page. So if you search in Facebook, I know some of you are not on Facebook, but it's Excellence Legal. If you just search for Excellence Legal, it'll pull up. So if you look down, it's not a post, it's a notes. You scroll over and there's events and pictures, and there's one called Notes. And so it's a 3-page document. So forgive me if there's typos. I think I've traveled something like 1,500 miles yet this week. Like I said, I have to live in Denver, so when I come out here, I try to go everywhere. Mm-hmm. So it's 3 pages long. It gives you a breakdown of if you have the consent of a sole legal custodian, when there's an emergency and a divorce or paternity suit has already been filed, when an emergency exists and a child has resided with the grandparent. It gives you the conditions under which you can pursue custody. Sometimes it's just visitation. and when visitation is available and when it's not. So it's my best summary to date. There are other options like an actual temporary guardianship or guardianship conservatorship, adoption. I did not go into in this summary provision because I think at this point we're talking about emergency situations. There'll be more postings as I am comfortable enough to tell you my insider view. But when I give you some advice like this, it's me telling you, yeah, we are all suffering because the courts are not check marking a box. And that's why these children are going into DCF custody without grandparents even being considered, and that will have to change. There is no excuse for the legislature's mandate in KSA 382286 for a grandparent preference. There's no excuse for this happening, and if it happened to you and you already lost your grandkids, file a private seeking petition. All the forms are online. File a private seeking petition and get that puppy back in court. Tell them you're disputing any adoption that happened, because that is a sync provision as well.